Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for October 14th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hello, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life that you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. And we are streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start by talking about last week's Weekly Tittle, which was called Cultivate a Bedroom Reset Routine. The assignment was to add a 5-minute bedroom reset habit to your daily routine if you didn't already have one. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who kicked off a new bedroom reset habit this week? Please let us know in the comments. In last week's discussion of things that probably shouldn't go in the bedroom, we talked about Ginger's axe, and Ginger said something like, yeah, thanks for putting that. I mentioned, the possibility of it showing up in a dream.
Yeah.
And Ginger said, thanks for putting that idea in my head. And I seem to have jinxed myself because the next
No.
morning I woke up from a nightmare in which I was being chased by a lunatic with an axe. So the point of my story is for a good night's sleep, make sure there's nothing scary in your bedroom.
That is hilarious. And I read this before and it made me laugh and it's making me laugh in the retelling. That is so funny. But it is a perfect illustration, albeit very, direct, of how clutter can just disturb your rest. Not all clutter actually leads directly to nightmares, but it does create a low level of chatter in your mind that can be distracting or unsettling and disturbing to your sleep. So staying ahead of bedroom clutter can only help your mind relax and give you a higher quality rest. You just have to think about how you mentally react to a non-cluttered space to see the difference. When you go into a space that isn't cluttered, you feel more calm and relaxed. And that's only going to enhance your ability to sleep deeply and well. So give it some thought and see if you can improve your sleep experience by decluttering around where you sleep. That was the point of the exercise. And avoid nightmares of lunatics chasing you with an axe in your sleep. Thank you for sharing that, Ed. It made me laugh.
And the lunatic was um, I called her a war lady.
A war
I
lady.
assume that a female warlord is called a war lady, right?
Oh.
Does that make sense? She was a female warlord named Linda.
Oh, actually with a name in your
Yes,
dream.
she actually had a name. Isn't that funny?
That is
Yeah.
hilarious. And what did you do to draw her wrath?
I really don't
Yeah.
recall that part. Yeah. I probably had it coming. Pat says the
Oh
background looks
man.
like the way my brain feels. And
Oh,
that's
see?
that's a great comment because that's kind of what I was going for. I went
Right.
looking for, what are some good metaphors for the ADHD brain, and they
Hmm.
suggested an iceberg, but I didn't like the sinking connotations of that.
Oh,
So,
right. Mm.
busy city was sort of what we were going for.
Right.
There's a lot going on in there.
And a lot of
A lot of
attention
great stuff trying to
shifting.
grab your attention. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's perfect.
Okay, Jacqueline says, I was dusting my shelves in the bedroom and decided I had too many decorative items to keep clean. So I
Mm.
chose a few of my least favorite things to declutter. I
Oh, excellent.
also decluttered some baking pans and cookie cutters.
Yay. We love it when you guys, go in and make some shifts after we talk to you. That's the whole point. So good for you.
Okay, we have a mountain of content prepared for
Yes, we do.
today. So
Yes, we do.
let's
Goodness.
just get right to it.
Dive on in it.
People with ADHD often struggle to declutter and organize because of challenges with time management, planning, and executive function. ADD-friendly ways to organize your life seeks to address these challenges with advice written specifically for an ADHD audience. Today, we're going to review the book ADD-friendly ways to organize your life and discuss lessons we can take from this organizing guide tailored to the needs of the ADD ADHD community.
Finally, we've arrived at this book review. I've recommended this book to clients many times over the years. I've always admired co-author and pro-organizer Judith Kolberg as a pioneer in our industry. She's an early NAPO member and starting her business in 1989. She wrote the first edition of this book in 2002. She was working with and talking about neurodivergent clients before it was even a thing. Since she and Kathleen Nadeau wrote the book, we've learned so much more about how ADD brains function and process information, and they updated the book in 2016. But I read the original because that was the copy I had in my library, and I felt nostalgic about reading the first edition again. It had been many years since I went through it the first time. As I read it again, I was happy to realize that a lot of the strategies that the authors recommend are ones I offer to my clients currently. Examples like make it fun. Those with ADD will are they don't want to stay with a task that they perceive as boring, and making the task like a game, making it fun somehow is the way to keep a person with ADD engaged in getting things done. Another one, if you want to add, you need to subtract. Been saying that forever. I'm sure you guys have heard me say that before. You can't only add things to your house and never subtract. After a lifetime of doing that, your space is going to be drowning. Use another one that I thought was really good. Use a stop coach and use a decision coach. Because I actually do this for my clients a lot, I act as a stop coach. And by that, they meant helping clients see when what they've done is enough and it's okay to stop. Sometimes ADHD people have a hard time deciding that they've completed the task, that they've done it enough, that it's perfect enough, and they get stuck in continuing to go back to the same thing, making it better, making it better, making it better. And I act as a reflection and say, nope, you got it. That's good enough. We got it. You can walk away from that one now. And having somebody be a stop coach is helpful for people with ADHD. And using a decision coach, I do that a lot, and especially virtually, helping people decide what they could do in what order to accomplish the task that they're trying to complete. And when the decisions are really overwhelming, having someone coach you through, it helps you get past being stuck when you're trying to make those decisions. So I do those for my clients a lot, and on the virtual calls, help people make those plans, help people make decisions about what to do in what order, and it's really, it's always very helpful. And yet there were ideas that I didn't remember from the first read that were really good ideas that I need to add to my toolbox for my clients. So I have a couple examples of those as well. One of them was put your hyper focus to work for you, meaning take advantage of your hyper focus ability by using that ability in your work. Instead of hyper focusing on hobbies or other leisure activities that ADHD people use to be more stimulated and be engaged, because what they're doing for work is something they find really boring and not attention grabbing. And so then they hyper focus on hobbies or other leisure activities. Switch it around instead and figure out a way for the things that you have an interest in that you like to hyper focus on. Use that as a skill and as a job. Find a job that makes use of that interest and focus. And then you can have a positive result from hyper focusing and get paid to hyper focus, which is not a bad idea. Another one was rotate your priorities. This is great for those who have many competing interests that are vying for their time. And because they have so many constantly switching interests, they really can't do any of them very well or get very far into any of them because they're constantly switching them around. But they suggest that you rotate your focus between those interests over a season. So you can do that over a season. Like the example that they gave was she did the indoor kinds of interests about reading books or cooking and things that were she could do in the wintertime inside. And then when it was summertime and the weather was better, then she could go outside and do the gardening things and the bike riding thing. I forget what the examples were for this person, but they basically said she divvied up her interests depending on the season of the year. And so she would focus on these few interests during that time of year, and then she would switch and focus on the other interests a different time of year. And that way she could be indulging in all of her interests, but she was divvying up her time, and she was able to spend more time with them and get better at them because she could focus on them better. And so I thought that was a great idea that I hadn't thought of before. And I think of teachers who do this all the time. Teachers, they're in school, and so they can't do any kind of traveling. So they rotate their interest to travel during the 2 months when they're off school. So they don't travel during the school year, but then they go and do a whole bunch of travel all in a compact amount of time over their summer break. And so you can see that you could divvy up how you focus your attention over time and be able to pursue more of your interests that way. Thought that was a great idea. The last one that I'm going to make, I kind of do this anyway, but I haven't called it this. So they suggested that you make a take me with you box, and that you make an errand box. And the take me with you box is supposed to be in the house on the way, out the door, like they suggested on a command center, near where you would be picking up
Your
your stuff and going out to the car.
your launching pad.
Yeah, the launching pad,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that you park it there. And the purpose of that box is to collect things that you intend to take out with you to run errands. And so that's inside the house. And then in the car, that you have an errand box in the car so that when you come out with your things from the take me with you box, you put them in the errand box, and then they're in the car. And what's good about that is for ADHD people, people that have that brain process, they need the visual cue, and having the errand objects in the front seat in a box next to them means that they're constantly visually reminded that, oh, I need to stop at the dry cleaners with my clothes. I need to take that purchase back to the store when I go buy it. I need to drop that off at Goodwill. And so having those things be there in the front seat with you is your visual cue to remember that errand and to do it while you're out. And so I thought those were, I had never thought to create a box in the car. Like I talk about putting the errands in the car, but I hadn't thought about making it a box that you have to look at. So I thought that was a great idea that I need to add for people to help them get their errands done, to help them remember that they need to do it while they're out. If I was honest, there's some strategies that seem like a tall order for a person with ADD to make happen. They seem too ambitious for some of my clients, and maybe the strategy was more hopeful thinking than executable ideas. But overall, the book does a good job of describing the various versions of persons with ADD and the pitfalls of various thought processes and actions those people operate under. If you aren't sure about yourself, the various clients that are described throughout the book will give you a good composite to compare yourself to and might help you decide to get tested and diagnosed. Later, it tells you strategies that might help you function better and with less stress. There's so many suggested strategies. I think you can try a few in different parts of the book and receive valuable help. Even if you don't relate to all the ideas or some seem too heavy a lift, you at least get a better understanding of the ways that you think differently from a neurotypical person, at least in relation to cluttering and clutter maintenance. I still think that this is a great place to start if you're wondering about yourself as having ADD, or if you and a family member or friend have been diagnosed with ADD. I think of it as a good primer, a good overview, a good launch spot on your ADD journey. Many thanks to Kolberg and Nadeau, the very French sounding Nadeau, for combining their perspectives to create this book. I think it's a really good central resource, even if you can't execute everything that's in it. And of course, we put out a survey, so now onto the survey data from you all about this book.
Gail, one of the things that was new to this survey, I had never done this. I hadn't done this on our previous book uh, related surveys,
Right?
was the star rating. So how many stars do you give this?
I would say that they get a 4
Okay. All right.
for me.
Okay. That's gonna that's gonna have no effect at all on our average star rating of 4. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's a perfect book, but I think that they did a great job of sort of introducing the concepts, introducing examples of how ADHD brains work differently and then strategies to cope with how they work differently.
Yeah.
And there's meat there. There's meat on the bone.
Okay, let's talk about the survey. We
Okay.
started off with a census question, and this is a very unscientific survey, of
And
course, because
everybody can tick any of the boxes, right? So they can
right,
have
right.
more than one.
We said please check any of the following statements that
Okay.
apply to you, and then so they don't add up
They
to
don't
the
add up to
total. No,
100,
right,
right? Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And the numbers are it's unscientific. It's probably skewed toward people who were, obviously it's skewed toward people who were interested enough to take our survey.
Right.
Nevertheless, they're sort of interesting numbers, just as kind of a raw take.
Mm.
The most popular choices: I have not been diagnosed, but believe that I may have ADHD. 34% of the 47 people who responded said
Yeah, a
that. So
third of the
that's,
people, like
yeah,
if you extrapolate that to a broader audience,
yeah.
to think that a third of the people are wandering around going, you know what, this might be me.
Um, the second was a member of my immediate family or household has ADHD. 32%.
Again, a third.
A
And
close, go on.
I there is a genetic component, and I think it's not unreasonable that if someone in your family is diagnosed, then it increases the likelihood that someone else in that genetic line is also going to have ADHD.
Third was a close friend, acquaintance, or coworker has ADHD at
Mm.
28%.
Somebody in your orbit.
A member of my extended family has ADHD. That was 19%.
Mm.
I am not aware of anyone with ADHD in my circles was 13%.
Not a big one, but
Yeah,
I bet that there is somebody you just don't know it yet.
right.
They haven't told you why their life is out of control or why
And
they're struggling.
and then I have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, came in at 11%.
Yeah, because you have to go to the doctor, and it has to be somebody that knows what they need to do to test for that, and so you have to have gone sought out to go through the process.
Yeah, and I found a figure of that something like 6% of American adults, that was the particular
The
study I
parameters,
looked
yeah,
at, but something like 6% of American adults uh, ha have ADHD, and that there are those who think that number may be low because many people in older age groups have never been tested or
yeah,
screened.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, and I often get clients who they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, and they just got diagnosed. Like
yeah,
they've been suffering their whole life, and somebody finally went, "Oh yeah, you have ADHD." They're like, "What?" Like they had no idea why they've been, swimming against the current through their whole life. And suddenly they find out in, the last third of their life, which I think is amazing.
yeah. Um, I took a self-test
Did you?
early in reading. I found a self-test from an ADHD testing service online and
Mm,
found that I was only about halfway. My total score was only about halfway to the number that they considered, where ADHD starts. But I
that's
think
cool.
that there's some overlap in
Mm,
anxiety disorders. I deal with some anxiety, and anxiety can manifest as like a mild form of obsessive compulsive disorder,
mm-hmm,
and also perfectionism is a thing
mm-hmm.
that people with
There's
anxiety
some symptoms that are crossovers.
that overlap. Yeah, so
Hmm.
very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Our next question was, what useful decluttering or organizing strategies or methods did you take away from the book? Um, M said, as our strengths can also be our weaknesses can be turned into strengths.
And that was one of the basic premises of the book. It's like,
Yeah,
yes, we understand that you function differently, that your brain functions differently, but you can still work with that, and you can adapt strategies based on how your brain works, and come up with a successful way for you to navigate, negotiate, to make things happen, and to keep control of the things that you need to do. And this book is specifically about managing clutter and managing tasks and that kind of stuff. But in general, the basis that they're sitting this on is, yeah, we know that it feels like a weakness, but you can work with it and turn it into a strength. And I think that was a great focus for the book.
A couple of comments. M mentioned the concept of ADD didn't exist when I was young.
Right,
That's
exactly.
that's true for a lot of people in our
Mm-hmm.
demographic groups.
Right.
Deborah says, I wasn't able to get the book on Kindle here, so haven't read it. I have numerous people in my family and friends group, colleagues, and pupils with ADHD. I haven't been diagnosed, but I'm certain I have it. Mild,
There,
but there, certainly. Brutally exacerbated by menopause.
oh God, menopause just makes everything worse. God, yes.
I went online to find coping mechanisms a few years ago and I had been doing all of it. I have learned how to deal with it by obsessively learning how to function in the world via podcasts, YouTube, etc.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest revelation for somebody who has ADHD and has just figured it out is that it isn't that you are a failure as a human. It's never that. The reason that you've been not able to cope is because people have been trying to teach you to cope as if your brain was neurotypical and that worked in the way that neurotypical brains work, and yours doesn't. And so you just need to work with a different set of skills, a different set of processes than someone else does that manages. It's that time blindness that and how that affects everything that you do, and the need for visual cues and the need for more stimulus in your brain to keep your focus. These are all things that you can work with and adapt for. You just need to adapt for how your brain actually works instead of trying to use strategies that work for someone who doesn't have your brain. And so I think that's the biggest point of relief when somebody finally gets diagnosed or finally realizes, oh man, my brain actually doesn't work the same as other people's. And then working within that framework to build your life. And it's you can really have a much different experience of life and really let go of I can't do this because I'm lazy or stupid or fill in the blank of all the things that people tell you, because you can't do things the way they think you should do them. We can let go of that.
Kit singled out this bit of advice. Think about the most effective level of focus for the task at hand.
Right. So they make the point that macro focus is a big picture focus. Detail focus is sorting and putting away everything in a space, including devising parking spaces for things in any room or organizing area. And then micro focus is a level of super detailed focus that's rarely needed in reclaiming your house. Unless you're pursuing a career that benefits from micro focus, this type of focus is generally used to avoid feeling overwhelmed with a regular organizing task. And so they talk about, if what you're doing if you're micro focusing on something, to get your bedroom put back together, and you're micro focusing on how the jewelry is laid out in the jewelry box, you're probably not tackling the original task in the best, most effective way. And so you can
Right.
shift your focus to a different level and trying to notice when you're doing the focuses that don't make sense for what the task is at hand.
Right. If you set out today to organize several of your kitchen cabinets, you don't want to end up micro focused on labeling all your spices more
Right. And
carefully.
putting them all in unique in the same
Yeah.
bottles or something. Yeah, yeah, that's a diversion, not a functioning the focus on what you wanted to do.
Sandra said, this is really a book for everybody. Love the idea of taking green breaks.
Hmm.
I noted one sentence that seems very true. ADD math is addition without subtraction.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great one. I say that to people all the time, and I hadn't really thought that there's sort of a ADD specific, we add and we don't think about subtracting because that requires that you change your focus to go and look. And so um it is very it's ADD math. You can't add, you can't only add, you also have to subtract. And that's a new concept sometimes with somebody with ADHD.
Really like this one from Terry, allocating time to decisions in proportion to the importance of the decision.
Hmm.
And she also mentioned importance of routines and having ease in my day.
Yeah. And this thing about decisions in proportion, make time just for the decision in proportion to it. We can spend a half a day trying to decide on something minor when it's really not the best way to spend your time. Think about how important this decision is and use your time in alignment to the decision's impact on your life. What shirt to wear to dinner? This is not a life altering decision, so don't spend a lot of time on it. What car to buy? That's a more impactful decision to your life, and that requires more time to consider the options. So I think we get a little, somebody that has ADHD gets a little lost sometimes in making the perfect decision, making the right decision, and they spend a lot of time trying to decide about something that's super, super minor in terms of impacting their life. And noticing that and stopping yourself when you've spent 3 hours trying to decide what to wear to dinner. It's about, yeah, just let it go and move on. I think that's a good one.
Okay, I'm just going to share just a couple that I identified because I want to be sure to get to all of our survey questions.
Mm,
Um, One was adults with ADD seem to both underdo it and overdo it. As paradoxical as this seems, this is a direct quotation.
mm.
Underdoing occurs when we don't stick to a task we set for ourselves because we're drawn away by something more interesting. Overdoing can also cause significant problems and is related to a well-known ADD tendency to get stuck and resist moving on to the next task of the day.
And getting stuck with what I said earlier about feeling like it's not perfect yet and needing somebody to say, no, you can stop. You've done that one well enough and it's time to move on. I think that that's a good reflection of, you know, an ADD person gets wound up in the details a little bit more than needs to. And sometimes you end up being, you, you overdo it. You just keep overdoing it and not letting it go. And being reminded of that, being brought out of that, and moving on is an important way for you to keep moving on with your life that day. Those are good ones.
And one more, another ADD related pattern that may interfere with organizing is to complicate a task.
Mm,
For example, you might decide to install a time management program on your computer, a potentially very useful approach to making better use of your time. However, if you're like many other adults with ADD, you might find that you've spent hours on your computer customizing calendars, color coding time blocks, and programming reminders, time that could have been better spent on another task. By making it overly complicated, you don't get down to the actual organizing. And
yeah.
I think that it's interesting how that overlaps with what what we talk about with paper clutter in particular,
Mm,
and the idea of bigger buckets as an
yes.
alternative to creating a filing system that is so complicated and
So
Byzantine, you
convoluted
will never be able to get everything put away
and never wish to put it away.
and never be able to find anything, even if you ever got
Again.
it all put away.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's really true. And I think that's that's how the hyper focus manifests. Oh, I'm going to do time management. Let me dive into that. And therefore, let me wind it up, blow it up, make it as big as possible instead of recognizing that you can get the time management program, you can do the basics to set it up, and then you can add to it over time. You don't have to do it all in one sitting right now. And instead you sort of dive down that rabbit hole and don't come out for, a half a day. And so that it does happen a lot. And that's a good example of, yeah, don't really need to complicate it all the time.
M says, I think our current fast-paced, complicated lifestyle has magnified any tendencies toward ADD.
Yes, I agree with you
And Terry
100%.
Terry added, especially constant information and distractions on phones, etc.
Right? Because, oh my gosh, what does an ADD person do but get distracted all the time? And now we've just made exponentially larger the ways that you can be distracted and how deep a rabbit hole you can go down. That is totally true. We're
Um,
making it harder.
And Patty shared using an aging drawer or age until ripe is a great strategy from the book. I've done that accidentally lately.
I know, right? If you think about it, that's what a junk drawer is, right? Like everybody puts things in the junk drawer, and it's like in theory, this is where a certain type of stuff goes, but in reality, it's just the drawer in which you swipe things off the counter and get them off the counter. And so you end up with a bunch of stuff in the junk drawer. It's like, why is this in here? Oh, I was cleaning up that day. And so it's like you're letting it sit in there and marinate. Like you let it age, and then when you come back to clean the junk drawer, suddenly those things that you swept in that were important when they went in have stopped being important now. And so I think everybody has a aging drawer in the fact that they have a junk drawer in their kitchen, but you can have a much more intentional aging drawer where you're like, okay, I can't make the decision yet, therefore I'm going to put it in here and wait and see if, a month from now, 6 months from now, it can come back out and I can let go of it. It's a good plan.
Okay, now we've talked about good stuff. Now we have to talk about challenges. We
Mm.
asked our audience, what parts or aspects of the book did you find difficult to grasp or challenging to apply to your home or situation? Kit named one of my number one gripes. Home as memory seems like too much work for the potential benefit and not useful for an entire family. Kit's talking about what the book calls the home as memory method. Here's an excerpt. A back room can serve as your long-term memory. If it is only May, but you don't want to forget to mail Christmas cards, put them in the long-term memory room. Move them to the short-term memory room as Christmas nears. I found this to be one of the most ridiculous ideas in the book. Like, who has the time and energy to shuffle stuff around the house as the seasons turn? You know, I think that this suggestion was in a section talking about professional assistance, and maybe if you were employing a professional organizer who came at least at least a couple of visits a month, you could
Mm.
make this strategy work. I'm skeptical.
Well, and I think on some level, it seemed to me like it was an interim step idea where your house isn't perfectly organized yet. It's not decluttered how you want it, but if in sort of a macro way, you could separate longer term things into one room, shorter term things into another room, that maybe you're sort of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while you wait to get your decluttering done, that it might work as an interim step. But it did seem like a lot of picking up and moving things around. And I agree with you. I thought that one was kind of a heavy lift, that it might not turn out in the way that they were hoping.
Terry
Like,
said, overall, I found it hard to engage with the book. It was a slog to get through it. I've read a lot of decluttering type books, and I don't recall this happening with any of them. It was said that this book is written in a way that would work for ADHD folks. I can see that many of the ideas could have value, but I was surprised the book with that focus was so hard for me, non-ADHD, to process. The idea of having an extensive team to work with on these issues might be necessary, but seems somewhat optimistic to me, especially if people are working during normal business hours.
I can tell you from client experience that many folks with ADD truly need this level of external support to successfully run their lives. Depending on the severity of the ADD, that kind of support can mean the difference between living a productive and enjoyable life to living in constant chaos all the time. Let your experience tell you that neurotypical brains really do function differently than ADHD brains, and it really, what you find to be a slog was probably much more engaging to somebody with ADHD. So the fact that there's constant shifting in the book between narrative and lists and summaries, that there's small paragraphs with bold headings. It's all in an attempt to capture attention and hold attention in short bursts so that it's easier for an ADD brain to consume. And so, from a standpoint of reading it, And Ed had said that he found it hard to read through it too. And
Yeah,
for
and
me, it wasn't hard because the information wasn't new to me, and this most of the strategies weren't new to me, and so it just read like a decluttering book to me. I mean, it a theory and strategy book to me that wasn't hard to read. But what about it was hard for you to read, Ed? Like,
well,
talk to your experience as
yeah,
well as Terry's.
I I constantly found my mind wandering, and some of that I guess was going off into thinking about particular points they were mentioning, and then thinking about my own to-do lists and what I needed to do today. And I don't know, it it did not keep my attention. And I think you're right, the format, the choppiness of it, lots of
Mm-hmm.
very short sections, a million subheads, and then the review sections that would recap everything in or sort of, but not quite recap everything in the section you just read,
Recap in a summary way, yeah.
was just a little much. And Naomi points out finding it hard to read should give us a window into what life is like for people who are wired differently from us.
Yes,
When they try
exactly.
to, sorry, I lost it. When they try to read books not designed for them.
Yeah.
True that.
True that, right? And
I,
but and if you have a neurotypical brain, reading about how ADD brains function is really a theory exercise to you because you
right.
can't experience it. And so you have to listen to how people describe the way that they think, and reading the explanations and the experiences of people, how brains with ADHD process is really just you understanding in theory what they're describing. But you can see examples of it happening in real time. If you're around someone ADD, then you have experienced the output of someone whose brain works that way. And sometimes that's sort of your way in, that you can see how they process information, how they react to things, how they are distracted or hyper focused, and you've experienced those in real time, or you can watch it happening in real time and realize that what's going on inside of them is not how you would process it, and accept that it's not a choice they're making to be difficult or confusing or not do it the way that you think makes sense. They are trying to deal with the way that their brain works, and it's just never going to be like yours. And I think that's a big, for people that have been judging a partner or a family member as failing at life and as at doing things wrong, and why don't they just follow my lead or take my example or do it the way I tell them to do it, and they can't do it the way that you tell them to do it, and accepting that that's real and not made up, and making space for, okay, my processes don't work for this person. They have to have different processes. And so I think just coming to that realization that there's no point, there's nothing to be gained for judging someone with ADHD as not doing life right. If they
Right.
don't do it the way that you do it, like a lot of people make that mistake. They're super judgmental about, if they would just follow this logical pathway, this linear thinking, this, time management with awareness of time, and they don't realize that that's an impossible ask for somebody with ADD. And so accepting that that's true, and then making space for them to come up with their own techniques to get to the same place is, it can only improve your relationships with people that have ADD that are in your life.
Um, CJ has a great comment. The
Mm,
difference between this book and the previous ones is it's an in-depth reference manual rather than a personal experience that led to a few basic strategies.
mm,
I liked being able to bounce around to whichever part struck my interest rather than reading it straight through. Like, who could do that with an encyclopedia? And
right?
and and yeah, I think they even, I don't know if that was in one of the forewords to the second edition, the suggestion that, start reading wherever you like. Um,
Right. It doesn't matter.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that each chapter can stand alone, and a typical book builds slowly, the information builds on itself across the chapters. And these chapters, there's a little bit of that, but mostly, the chapter can stand alone and you can go in the middle and read something and it doesn't detract from what you're reading if you haven't read the 5 chapters that came before it. And that's because they're building for an ADD audience.
Yeah. M listened to the audiobook and said, thought it was hard to stay engaged because it stuck to the same pattern for each problem. Story of the person, discussion, self-help, help from friends, professional help, recap. It would have been easier had I read a hard copy.
Yeah, that's probably true because then you're following along and you can see the
You can
format a little bit more.
you can see the outline,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and realize that's the outline you're following.
And it
Um,
probably to us it feels a little repetitive, but to somebody that's engaging in the book in sporadic ways and in a non-linear way, it probably doesn't seem repetitive.
yeah. And a couple other comments I had. Some of the anecdotes and case studies seemed very contrived, and some of the strategy suggestions felt kind of pie in the sky, impossible to implement, or at least unlikely to be implemented by the average reader. For example, the section on paradoxical decision making more or less assumes that every important decision that you have to make is going to be a simple binary choice, but that's not how real life works.
Mm,
So the advice to think of the worst choice you could make, then make the opposite choice, has very limited value, I think.
mm. And I have to say that as I was reading those case studies and the people that were the examples that they were setting, I've had all those clients. I've met all those people, and so while they may have been a composite, for instance, they were describing an ADHD person that I've interacted with and functioned in that way, and so they were less contrived to me because I've met those people.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it seems, again, it seems this is an example of a neurotypical person wouldn't interact that way or function that way, and the person that is being described sounds made up, except that they're not. They really do function that way, and so I can see why it would seem contrived
Well, the one
if you
about
can't relate.
Dan, who was trying to decide how to prepare for retirement, and he thought, well, I could, invest. So the paradoxical decision-making approach was, I'm going to eat all my meals out in restaurants, so I don't have any, so I build up all kinds of credit card debt, and I'm going to invest in risky stocks. It was a whole, it sounded like a just so story to me.
Right, right, right.
I could not see really using the paradoxical decision-making approach to produce any
To
useful
get
result.
to get anywhere. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I hear you.
yeah. Okay,
Okay.
let's go on. Let's see. We asked our audience to share favorite quotations or key ideas or concepts. Um, Kit mentioned levels of structure and support, like Haley Honeyman of Busy Bee with ADHD and Sarah McGlory of Adaptive Living. The authors of this book acknowledge that issues inherently have multiple potential solutions depending on one's particular situation and capacity. This concept in itself has been revolutionary in my and my daughter's understanding of how we might work with our brains to accomplish our goals.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that she's making there. That really we're just saying there's many paths to the goal, and you just need to find the one that works for you. And having that perspective of there's no judgment and there's no right way. There's always multiple ways that a job can get done, and you pick the one that works for you.
M mentioned my closet is beautifully organized by garment type and color. When I read the suggestion of organizing the closet by outfit, it struck me that my most favorite blouse ever, hung neatly by color with other blouses, is useless if there are no clothes to go with it, or if it
Mm.
has been overlooked as part of the closet landscape. I think going through my closet to create outfits will make it possible to eliminate more clutter clothing as well as streamline the process of deciding what to wear.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And it is the idea that you have clothes in your closet that you love, but you can't just go out in the shirt, right? You gotta have something to go with the shirt to go out into the world in public and not get arrested. And so it's important to know what you would match that shirt with and not just have it hanging in the closet. So great idea that you pulled something out of that you can shift your processing in your closet a little differently and see what can come out.
I'll just give you a couple more quick ones. Working with your mood often works better for adults with ADD than trying to schedule a task.
I agree with that. And you can make some space for I want to work on an organizing project, and then you know part of what happens when I show up with clients is, so what are we working on today? Like, I don't know, and we may make a plan that 2 weeks from now we're going to work in this room, but when I show up on that day, if they're not in that space, there's no point in me forcing it. Let's work on, it's all got to get done, so let's work on what you're into today. And that, and they've created a focus, they've got something on their mind right now, let's go work on it while you're into it. And I think that that improves our outcomes a lot.
Yeah. Another one was don't try to adopt someone else's organizing values. And
Yeah.
this is something we've said before. If being tidy or organized has negative connotations for you as tedious, boring, uptight, perfectionist,
Mm.
motivate yourself by organizing according to your own values.
And I think as an organizer, I have to recognize that what I would do or how far I would go to organize a space is not everybody's goal. And I give this advice to organizers a lot, especially new organizers. Like, you can't get hung up on, that you would do another 15 hours in that bedroom if you could to organize it differently. If when the client is satisfied, the organizing is done. Like that, you don't get to impose your sense of what is complete on the client. And I think that that's true for anybody. What you think is organized, when you feel like it's enough, it's enough. And that's the joy of it being in your own home, that you don't have to
Mhm.
make it look
Right.
like Martha Stewart's house. You can make it look like a house that feels comfortable to you. And that's an important thing to know about yourself. Like, here's where I feel like it's tidy, and here's where I feel like it works well for me and I can function here. And that's what you want to aim for.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. Kolberg and Nadeau base most of their ADD-friendly organizing strategies on the idea that people with ADHD can reframe their neurodivergent traits as strengths, working with their ADHD to take charge of life. And we ask
Mm.
if you've explored this approach, how has it worked for you? What do you see as the pros and cons of their suggested strategies? Um, M said, what surprised me the most was the very high percentage of strategies I figured out for myself and have implemented over the decades without having read the book. I assumed that the strategies I use were the normal way of coping with life.
There you go. There are a lot of ADD people who have backed themselves into coping strategies that work, that don't make sense to anybody else around them, but they are doing them and it makes them it works. And thank goodness. A lot of people find that they have coping mechanisms that work while they're kids and then maybe get them through high school, maybe college, but if somewhere along the way, the coping mechanisms that they've worked out don't quite withstand the pressure of college, for instance, or they don't translate into the adult world. So sometimes those coping mechanisms break down. But if you've got ones that you've worked out and they've translated into your adult life and still function for you, that's awesome. If you manage to work it out without and seeking outside help, good for you. You're one of the lucky ones. It's a great thing to happen.
Kit says, it feels like their approach relies on flipping the script. Just look at things from this angle and your entire life can be orderly and smooth. That's not real. The whole thing would feel more credible if at least one of them was ADHD and they acknowledged that life would still be a struggle with lots of ups and downs and times of amazing progress followed by absolute paralysis.
Yeah, I think that that's true. You know, life is not a straight line, right? And we don't always, we learn things and we learn strategies and we try them and then we fail at them and we have to go back to them and restart them. All habits are not perfectly formed. All changes are not permanently made. And so, there is some messiness in life. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to point out, that the approach isn't always going to be orderly and smooth, right? It'll end up being a more zigzaggy path maybe before you get to some place that feels comfortable. But it is worth continuing to reiterate, to do another version and refine until you get it to something that really works for who you are.
Um, Next, we asked about levels of support. Throughout the book, the authors suggest a three-pronged approach to applying their organizing strategies. You can do the work yourself, you can enlist the help of non-professionals, such as family and friends, and or employ the services of professionals, such as professional organizers, ADHD coaches, and counselors. And so
Mm.
we ask, if you've explored this approach, how successfully have you applied various levels of support to help your decluttering and organizing? What do you see as the pros and cons? Um, GF said, I can't afford support, unfortunately, hence the struggle doing it all by myself. This was a common critique that I saw reading online reviews of the book, was the heavy reliance on professional support. And I mean, you could see why the authors would have a little bit of a bias in that direction, since they
Right, two
are a
professionals
professional organizer and a
and a
clinical
therapist.
psychologist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that, it is a recognition that including a professional might make your path shorter and faster. That learning a new habit or coming up with a new idea or working around the things that you are frozen about or paralyzed about can only be improved with a professional backing you up. And if you can't afford to have that happen, there's still ways to make it happen. It just won't be as, it might not be as fast and as smooth for you to get there as somebody that brings in a secondary support. But I think that they make a great point of adding that you can have somebody in your orbit, somebody in your life, a friend or family member that can do some of those things for you or support you in doing them. And and even just that one extra level of, I'm not doing it by myself, I'm adding my friend to come. There was some example in the middle where the person was in the garden and the friend was sitting there with her while she worked in the garden, and that was enough for her to stay
Right.
focused on doing what she needed to do in the garden. And that to me was like, if you realize that that really helps you stay focused, and having company while you do something is worth pursuing, because that person doesn't have to have any specialized skills or do anything. They just have to sit there and drink their coffee while you work. And I think that just adding that gives you the experience of what it's like to have an extra person participate without having it be a heavy lift for the other person.
Right. Sandra said, the book made me realize I should have worked with a professional organizer when I started decluttering my house.
Mm.
The book mentions considering the cost of not enlisting support when deciding whether support is affordable. I would have saved a lot of time.
Yeah, like I said, they're gonna get you there faster if they can, because they're gonna keep you on task and they're going to be helping you with those decisions that you find odious or difficult or stressful to do. And they can come up with that linear timeline of what to do in what order that maybe is hard for you to get there. And so, sure, somebody that's available to back you up with some skills is going to make your job and make your work easier for sure. You can still
Um,
get there though.
my other 2 cents on this was I found the examples in the book of support from family and friends unrealistically optimistic.
They were optimistic.
I think many of us would struggle to find a single reliable helper willing to put on all of these different hats, much less a group of volunteers with a half dozen or so skill sets that the support requires.
Mm,
I think the book sort of presented a best case scenario,
sure.
Also, I found the cutesy names for the helpers: time tutor, tech tamer, clutter
And you are an
companion,
alliterative
paper
king too. That's
partner.
pretty
Yeah,
funny.
I found them annoyingly alliterative and patronizingly precious.
Says the alliterative king.
Right? But seriously, I think the book leans so heavily on the idea of enlisting a bunch of friends or family as helpers in one capacity or another.
Mm,
And it's advice that many people would probably find hard to implement. And I saw that critique from a lot of people who gave us feedback.
right.
This,
And I think
it's hard to find one good, reliable helper, much
right.
less the six or eight that I'd need.
Right. And I think that the one thing that they don't address is if your available friend or family member is somebody who is judgmental to you, is has been giving you a hard time for your whole life, has been giving you negative feedback that doesn't make you feel supported. Like sometimes the person that's available to you is also somebody with whom you have a dynamic that is they're very judgmental of you and very harsh with you and very pushy with you. And that person would not be great to work with. I recommend that people, edit. They're very careful about the person that they bring in to support them so that you don't feel run over, taken advantage of, pushed on, yelled at, belittled while you're doing the work. And so I think, that they're optimistic that all the people that would be available would also be good people for that person to work with. And I think it's not always true. So you're right about that.
Okay, well, lastly, we asked our survey respondents to rate the book on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, and it we came up with an average rating of 4.0 stars.
4.0.
So
All
there you have
right.
it.
4 out of 5, not bad.
Okay, we are out of time. I'm gonna remind everybody we'll be back next week, October 21st at the usual time. We have not settled on our topic yet, so watch your email for that. Gail, why don't you give us the tittle?
Okay, this week's title is the stubby to-do list. In this week's assignment, it's to experiment with a stubby to-do list, which was one of the productivity ideas suggested in ADD-friendly ways to organize your life. Sit down with a writing instrument and a blank sheet of paper to write on. Set a timer for 5 minutes and conduct a brain dump. This is our part. This is our preparatory part that we're giving you in advance. And this was not in the book. This is our ad. Write down everything you need to do or that you're worried about right now. This might include work tasks, errands, chores, appointments, calls you need to make, etc. And keep writing until the 5 minute timer goes off. Now this is the part that they suggest in the book, the stubby to-do list. Take a brightly colored card or a piece of paper or a sticky note to serve as your stubby to-do list. Select no more than 5 items from your brain dump. Transfer them to the stubby list. This will be your focus for today. Write the items on your stubby list in big, bold print. At the end of the day, transfer any incomplete items to tomorrow's stubby to-do list and try this experiment for a few days. Set the goal of shortening your stubby to-do list until it's realistic to complete it on most days. So you're putting the 3 to 5 most important things today to work on and that you're trying to get those accomplished today. And that's the point of the list, to focus your priorities down to the top winners of what needs your attention today and serving as a brightly colored bold written list to remind you what to stay focused on today. So do that experiment for a couple of days and see if the stubby to-do list helps you stay focused on what you need to get done. And then come back and tell us about it.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from our audience, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Oh, thanks everybody for letting me review this book that I've been recommending for so long. I think it has enough value in it that it would really be worth the effort to read. If you find the audiobook hard to listen to, go to the hard copy. There is a second edition that was written in 2016, so you probably want to try to get the second edition and read the more updated version that reflects some of the newer research and that kind of stuff. I'm sure that the resource page at the back is updated as well. And it was worth the effort. So thanks for letting me review it today. Appreciate it. I hope you got something out of reading the book. And you're happy. I'm happy for you guys to make comments, ask questions about strategies. If you try stuff and you want to talk about it or you want to give feedback to the group, feel free to go in and make comments about how you interacted with the strategies in the book and whether you were able to implement them and what it felt like for you and what kind of results you got out of it. So we'd love to hear about that as well. Feel free to keep us up as you try to implement some. Thanks for coming today. We appreciate it. See you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.